Hello, in this lecture you will learn how to access and modify your data in your database using C# language, and in this case we will be using ado.net technology as well as .NET Core 3.0 technology. However, I will mention that it would work the same way with .NET Framework or lower versions of .NET Core. So, we have already prepared some stored procedures. So we have stored procedures and we have 3 of them. First of all, let's start with the insert into test table. So let's open that up, and if you right click on the procedure and you click on modify, it will open up, and then you will actually be able to modify it. So we have it opened, and as you can see the syntax is quite simple. You simply write alter before the procedure, and that would make it modifiable or alterable. But what we need to look at is what it does. So we have the name, of course, and then we have 2 variables. We have the text, and then we have our DEC, our decimal value. So again, we are using the same exact table, and no data has been deleted from what you've seen in the previous lectures. So it's all there. But we will be inserting another record, and as you can see, we are inserting that in a very simple way, the way we have learned before. So you have the text test column, and then deck test column, and then you have the values. So we are simply inserting the full record in this one. Now in the next one, we will be retrieving a single record, so let's take a look at that. As you can see, we are passing in one variable. We are calling it ID, and we will filter it by ID. Now, since we want only one record, we should filter it by ID because there will only be one such ID value for each record. So we have select, from, where. That's it. Very simple. And finally, we have all records from test table, get all records from test table. And as you can see, this is even more simple. We aren't even passing through any variables. We just have select all from test table. So now let's move on to the Visual Studio. The Visual Studio, that's where you do your C# coding. So I already have a console application set up. This is a basic template that you just click a few buttons and it loads up for you. So we delete right away the value there, and then we move on to actually doing some stuff. So first of all, we will write 3 methods for 3 different interactions with the database. So the first one will be execute non-query. So that will not return any data from the database, but it will show how many records, how many rows were affected. You usually don't need that information, but just for the showcasing case, we will show it. So later we will move on to the scalar, which is returning one record, one row, or rather one column of one row. So we will do that, and then we will do execute reader, and the reader will be getting all of those values and reading through all of them. So that will be a bit more complicated. Now let's move on to the first one. Let's simply do a simple basic static method, and let's do void we won't return anything, and let's do non-query. Non-query, like that. You can call it wherever you want to. This has nothing to do with what we are going to do. And first of all, you will need to establish the connection, but before we do that, actually, we need to install the driver. So to do that, you go and right click on your project. You go to manage NuGet packages. And in the NuGet packages, you will look for system data SQL client. System.data.sql client, and this is gonna be the first one. And now you can see that we do have latest pre-release. I would suggest going with latest stable instead. You should never go with pre-release. Latest stable usually works better and it's less risky to use. So let's do latest stable. And then let's do install. Install, and it will get installed. We'll have that. And once you have that, you get back. And now we can deal with the connection and the command later. So to do the connection, you access everything for system, data. And then we need SQL client, and SQL connection. SQL connection, just like that. And let's call it con equals new SQL connection, and we will pass through the properties here the connection string. Now, in the previous lecture, I have built the connection string, so I will actually just copy it. I have it here. Right here I have it. And I will just copy it and paste it. And paste it right here. So, as you can see, you should have the connection ready, and you will be able to just paste it. You shouldn't rewrite it every time, because it is very easy to actually make a mistake in one of these connection strings. So once you have one working and tested, you just copy it and paste it again. And one thing to note here, you have a backslash, you need to escape it, and you do that with another backslash. Now we have our connection ready. Ready but not yet connected. And to make the matter simple, we will actually do using. We will do using, and it's gonna be this system data SQL client. SQL client, like that. Let's paste it so that we won't need to do as much writing. So you can simplify, as you can see. And let's simplify this one as well. As you can see, we have system.data.sql client, and we simplify that. We are using that namespace now. So let's move on. And let's do actually SQL connection now. SQL connection, and let's call it. We need command. Sorry, we need SQL command. SQL command, and let's call it cmd equals new SQL command. And in the command, you need to pass through two things. You need. First one is the name of the stored procedure. So we just leave it blank for now. We'll put it in later. And here you need the connection. So you do con the connection that we have, and you have that. And now one very, very important part. You must keep your strongest attention on this one, because if you miss this one, you'll get an error which is very difficult to figure out. And you always have to look for this. If you get some kind of an error, you always look at it first, at this piece of code first. So it's very simple, but it's very useful. You do cmd and you do command type, and then you do equals system data command type. And as you can see, you have 3 different command types. You have stored procedure, table direct, and text. We won't get into table direct, but text obviously is a text command, so you could simply write that query like that. But there are some safety issues, there are some difficulties as well when you write a simple string. There's just no point in doing that. So we are going to do stored procedure. However, the reason it is important to declare that, and you will get an error if you do not, is simply because the default is text. You need stored procedure, but default is text, therefore an error. So let's move on and let's put in some parameters we need. So let's do cmd, and then you do parameters. And then there are several options. You can add range, add with value. I would suggest always going add with value, So you do that, and first of all you need the parameter name. So that is the name of that variable in the stored procedure that you have in your SQL server. And then you need the actual value, so we were just gonna insert any kind of value. Let's do test tt. Let's do more t's, just so that we see the difference from the other records. And then you can actually copy this. And what I would suggest doing when you have more than, say, 2 or 3, I would suggest deleting the value and leave it in blank like that. And then you simply highlight it, you copy it, and you paste it as many times as you have values, as you have variables. It will save you a lot of time. So in this case, we need some kind of a decimal value. So let's do 5, let's say 36. And this one will be called deck, and the first one is txt, deck and txt. Now, what we should do now is enter the stored procedure name. So let's get back to the SQL server. And the best way to do that is simply to copy it and paste it. You copy it and you paste it right here. Now again, when you work with string values, that have to be kind of exactly the same, you should go with the copy paste approach. You shouldn't rewrite that. You will make mistakes and you will get errors. So we have the name of the stored procedure and we can move on now. And what we do next is also very important, almost as important as the command type, although you will actually see somewhat relative error in this case. But you need to open the connection. So you do con and you do execute. Actually open. You do open, not execute. You do open. So that's it. You do open. And then next we will be doing the execution part. But before that, we will want to write the result to line. Again, this is non-query, it doesn't return anything. However, it does state how many rows were affected. So it's not really that useful, but it can be useful in some cases. Normally, you would just do try and catch statement and you would look for exceptions to be thrown, and therefore if an exception was thrown, you would know that something in fact went wrong. So let's do console now. Console, and then you do right line, let's say right line, and then you do the actual command. So you simply do cmd execute non-query. Execute non-query will be that non-query thing, and you can also see that you have execute non-query async. So if you want to do asynchronous, you can do that as well. So let's do execute non-query this time, just like that, very simply, and you will get your result. Now let's move on to scalar, and as you can see, we took quite a lot of time with the first one, but I will show you how to make it all very quick with the next ones. So let's do static. Let's do static void scalar, let's call it scalar. And to save time now, so the only difference that you will have will be the parameters, the number of them and them themselves, and then you'll also have different command name, and then you'll also have different execution type, although not necessarily, you might have the same one. So what we will do now is we will copy everything up to the execution, and we will paste it like that. We will paste it, and as you can see, we just save a whole lot of time. So you need to start checking for differences from the top, and the first difference, if the connection string is the same and you are aware of that, you start checking from the command. Obviously the command will likely be different, so you just delete that right away. We don't know yet what the command is, but it doesn't matter, we just delete it right away, the name of the stored procedure. And then we also only need one parameter in this case, so let's delete this one and let's change this one to ID. This is gonna be the ID, and the ID needs a number, so let's say number 5. Number 5, we do have enough records for that number. So we do number 5, and now we simply need to execute. We simply need to execute. So again, let's write console write line, like that. And we will do a cmd execute scalar, just like that. You have your result. Everything is almost ready. We just need the command, the stored procedure. So let's go to the management studio and let's look for that one, and it's gonna be this one with the ID parameter here. So let's copy it all. Let's paste it then. And then we have the ID 5, that's all fine. We have execute scalar, and we have the name of the command. So as you can see, we just saved probably at least 5 minutes of writing and rewriting. It was a lot quicker to do. And we will actually do the same thing with the third one, with the reader. So let's do static void reader, and let's open it up, and you can actually copy the whole method. That's what I usually do. I copy the whole method, I just change the return types. It's a lot easier that way. So now let's copy again the same part from this one, and we won't actually need any parameters, so let's just delete that right away. And then we need to delete the command. It will be a different one, and this one will actually be a lot more different than the previous ones, because you get several values and several rows and several columns. It's quite a bit more complicated, and you have to be very, very careful with what you're doing in this case. You have to be very careful with those readers. So first of all, we have the connection opened, and then we can execute something. So we will be retrieving a reader. So let's do SQL data reader we need, and let's call it rd equals cmd execute reader, not XML reader, but reader. Execute reader, and again you can see you have a sync. Execute reader we have, and now we will try to read. So as you can see, you first of all execute reader and you retrieve all those values into that reader. But after you retrieve it, you need to actually read it all. You need to read it all, and to do that you need a while loop. You do while loop, and you loop through that reader's values. So let's do rd read, and as you can see, you can also do read async. So let's do read like that, and then we will go through each value and we will put it to the line, to one line. Actually, we will put each row to one line. So let's do first of all console write like that, and we will start with new line. So to do a new line in a string, as you may already know, it's backslash and n, and the first value will be id. So let's do id, let's do a little colon here, space, and let's do plus. Now the interesting part, how you actually get a record. So remember, the loop loops through each row, and each row has some number of columns. It could be just one column, but it could be 50 columns. You don't know that. It can be many different things. So let's do first of all rd, and then you need to get. So you do get. As you can see, you do get. And then we will be looking the ID that's gonna be integer. So we are looking for int 32. You are looking for int 32. Int 32 is that basic integer value. As you can see, int 16 is short in C#, and then int 64 is long. So we are looking for int 32. And we have that, and then you need to put in the index. So the index is in the same order that you write it down in the query in the stored procedure. So if we go to the stored procedure, in this case you have all, so it will all be according to how it is set in the database. So if we open the database, the designer view, you will see that everything starts with ID, and when we go to text test, and when we go to deck test. So the first value, index 0, will be ID. The second, index 1, will be text test, and the third, index 2, will be deck test. Now let's get back to the Visual Studio, and we already have that 0 index plus, let's do some names here. So let's separate that. Let's do text test, a little comma, a little colon actually. And then let's do plus rd get string. Now remember, in the SQL Server, in the database, we had n varchar. So no matter what the text type is, you will be able to retrieve string. So you do get string, and then it's gonna be index 1. And then let's do plus once more, And then this time let's do dec. This is simply dec. And let's give it colon, space, and let's do plus rd get decimal. Now this is very important. Normally in C# you would use double for these types. However, you have to retrieve decimal because you'll get an error that it is unable to cast to double. So you need to use decimal, get decimal. And then of course you can convert it to double. And you do 2. The index is 2. Now, let's go to the top and let's put them in here. So let's do non-query first. Non-query first, then the scalar, and then the reader. Then the reader we do, just like that. And then also let's do console read line, just in case, or read key rather. Just in case, we will read that key, and let's see what happens. See what happens with this. Let's try to launch it and hope for the best. See, it should be a quick launch. And first of all, it should insert, and then it should retrieve one single value, and then it should read them all. Let's see if that works out for us. So for some reason it is having a bit of a problem here, and as you can see we don't have simply the name of the stored procedure. So let's just try to copy that and launch it again. Let's see if it actually works. It should be all perfect. Let's launch that again, and as you can see it is really quite simple to do, and we have our answers. So first of all you have number 1, so that is how many rows were affected. Now this would be a bit more interesting if we did an update, say for all these values. So we would have some 15 values and you would see number 15, that is the rows affected. But then you get the scalar, so that's tst1, and remember we had id 5. So if we go to the reader where we see all of the values and we check the id 5, we can see clearly that it is in fact tst1, the text test value. So with that we will conclude this lecture.